The discovery, the desert planet of Orpheon 9 stretched endlessly beneath, a pale yellow sky where two suns burned faintly behind layers of thin clouds, and a soft wind carried fine grains of silver sand that whispered as they shifted across the surface of a forgotten world. For centuries, no one had cared to visit this place until the day a survey drone stumbled upon something that should not have existed at all. A structure so massive and ancient that its presence defied every known record of history. Rising from the sands like the spine of some buried giant, a colossal black monolith stood rooted deep in the heart of the desert. Its surface was smooth and seamless, untouched by time or erosion, and strange alien symbols spiraled across its sides in patterns that no one had ever seen before. For decades, the Interstellar Research Council had poured countless resources into studying the artifact. Teams of scientists from dozens of species came and went. Engineers built massive scanning stations around it, and linguists spent years trying to decode the runes etched across its flawless surface. Yet nothing worked. Every attempt to penetrate it failed. Plasma drills burned out. Quantum cutters shattered like fragile glass. Energy beams that could slice through asteroid rock simply bent away from the monolith's surface, as though space itself refused to allow entry. Whatever lay sealed inside had remained untouched for billions of years, and the seal was unlike anything anyone had ever encountered before. On the 50th year of the project, a young human engineer named Ethan arrived on Orpheon 9, a replacement for a senior technician who had retired in frustration. Unlike most of the seasoned researchers around him, Ethan was relatively unknown, chosen not because of status, but because his mind worked differently from the rest. He was quiet, observant, and carried a habit of noticing patterns where others saw chaos. When he first stood before the artifact, the towering black surface reflecting the faint glow of the twin suns, something strange happened. As he placed his hand near the spiraling symbols, he felt a soft vibration run through his fingertips, almost like the distant hum of a living heartbeat hidden deep within the stone. He stepped back quickly and glanced around to see if anyone else had felt it, but the nearby alien technicians and robotic drones continued their work unaffected. Whatever it was, the reaction was only happening to him. That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay awake in the research outpost, listening to the soft hum of the ventilation systems, while the image of the spiraling symbols burned behind his eyelids. He thought about the strange vibration and wondered if his imagination had invented it. Yet deep inside he knew it had been reeled out over the following days. Ethan spent every free moment studying the artifact. He pored over scans of the symbols, comparing them with thousands of known alien languages cataloged by the Council. None matched perfectly, but he began to notice something unusual. Certain patterns in the symbols resembled fragments of ancient human languages from Earth, old forms of communication no longer spoken, but still preserved in digital archives. No one else had noticed this because no one else had thought to compare it with primitive human writing systems. The more he analyzed, the clearer the patterns became. There were connections between the symbols and early Earth glyphs, but it was more than that. It felt deliberate, as if whoever had created the seal had designed it expecting humans to one day encounter it. This thought unsettled Ethan deeply, because humanity had only been exploring space for a few centuries, while the artifact was older than recorded history itself. How could its creators have known about humans before humans even existed as a species? As the days passed, strange things began to happen whenever Ethan was near the monolith. Instruments malfunctioned without reason. Low-frequency vibrations resonated through the air. At times he thought he could hear faint whispers carried by the desert wind, though no one else seemed to notice them. Even stranger were the dreams. Every night, Ethan found himself standing inside a vast alien city of shining crystal towers, beneath 3 enormous moons. He saw alien stars he had never encountered before and heard voices speaking a language he could not understand, yet somehow his heart recognized its meaning. When he mentioned the dreams to the lead researcher, an elderly alien scholar named Keller, the old being dismissed them as stress-induced hallucinations. But Ethan knew better. The artifact was somehow reaching into his mind, and he could not ignore it. Eventually, word of Ethan's findings spread among the researchers, and debates erupted within the council. Some of the alien factions viewed his discoveries with suspicion. The Thravik delegates in particular, a towering insectoid species known for their precision and order, feared what this could mean. If the artifact was somehow designed to respond to humans, then humanity's role in galactic history might be far more significant than anyone had believed. The Nayari, an aquatic race with translucent skin and luminous eyes, argued that this knowledge must be shared openly, but others whispered that humans could not be trusted with such power. Despite the growing tension, Ethan remained focused on the artifact. Late one night, when most of the research station had powered down and the desert winds carried only silence, he returned to the monolith alone. The black surface shimmered faintly under the starlight, and as he approached, the symbols began to glow softly, pulsing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. This time, he reached out without hesitation and placed his palm against the cold surface. A surge of energy coursed through him, and for the briefest instant, he felt as if he was somewhere else entirely. He saw fragments of a memory, not his own, flashes of beings unlike anything recorded in any database, towering creatures of light and shadow shaping entire worlds with their hands, and then a terrible war tearing their empire apart. The vision ended as suddenly as it began, leaving Ethan breathless and trembling on the desert floor. When he returned to the outpost, he recorded every detail he could remember from the vision, convinced that the artifact was trying to communicate. But he also understood something far more unsettling. The seal was not just a door. It was a message, a test, and perhaps even a warning. Ethan did not know why, but deep within his chest, a certainty began to form. He was connected to this artifact in a way no one else was. And if the seal could ever be opened, it would be opened by a human hand, maybe his own. The human key. The next morning on Orpheon 9 began with a soft red glow as the twin suns slowly rose above the endless dunes, painting the sky with shifting colors of orange and pale gold. The research station came alive with its usual hum of activity, but Ethan could feel that something had changed. Ever since he had touched the monolith the night before, there was a strange weight in the air, an unspoken tension as though the desert itself was holding its breath. He walked slowly toward the excavation site where the artifact stood, half buried in the shimmering sands, and watched as the other researchers moved about with cautious precision, setting up scanners and recalibrating instruments. When Ethan reached the main console, Keller, the elder alien scholar, was already there, his luminous amber eyes fixed on the towering black surface of the seal. The old scholar spoke softly in his deep, resonant voice, saying that overnight the artifact's energy readings had spiked to levels never recorded before. Ethan knew the truth, but kept silent about what he had experienced, unsure if anyone would believe him. Instead, he focused on his analysis, studying the strange spirals and glyphs etched into the monolith, tracing their curves with his gaze until he could almost see meaning where others saw only chaos. The more he worked, the stronger the patterns became, as though the symbols themselves were guiding him. Ethan discovered that several of the glyphs shared uncanny similarities with fragments of ancient Earth scripts, particularly languages once spoken thousands of years ago in forgotten human civilizations. None of the alien scholars could explain this coincidence, yet to Ethan it felt deliberate, like a hidden thread weaving humanity's distant past with the unknown builders of the artifact. That night, he spent hours in the station's archives, cross-referencing ancient records until his eyes burned with exhaustion. Each connection he uncovered deepened his unease, because the implications were impossible to ignore. The creators of the seal must have known about humanity long before humans had ever evolved on Earth. The thought unsettled him and filled his mind with endless questions that had no answers. Why had humans been chosen? What lay behind the seal that required their involvement? And why had no one else in the galaxy managed to open it after so many centuries? Days passed, and as Ethan drew closer to understanding the patterns, strange phenomena began to intensify. The air around the monolith carried an almost imperceptible vibration, a soft hum just beyond the range of ordinary hearing, like a secret heartbeat resonating through the desert floor. Lights inside the research station flickered without reason whenever Ethan neared the seal. Instruments failed to record accurate readings, and yet when Ethan touched the surface, the glyphs pulsed faintly beneath his fingertips, responding as though the monolith somehow recognized him. Rumors spread quickly through the camp. Some whispered that the artifact was alive, others feared that Ethan himself had triggered something dangerous. Among the alien factions within the council, unease turned into quiet distrust. The Throvik scientists were the most vocal in their concerns, insisting that humans should be removed from the project altogether. Their leader, a tall figure with glossy chitin and glowing compound eyes, accused Ethan of interfering with forces far beyond his understanding. The Nayari delegates argued in his defense, believing that perhaps the artifact had been waiting for humans all along. The disagreements grew heated, and for the first time, the unity of the research effort began to fracture. Despite the growing conflict, Ethan could not stop. Every night the dreams returned, pulling him deeper into visions of strange alien landscapes and ancient battles beneath unfamiliar stars. He walked through massive crystal halls where beings of light spoke in voices that resonated inside his mind rather than through sound. Though he could not understand the words, he somehow knew their meaning. The voices spoke of a great war, of a weapon sealed away to prevent the destruction of countless worlds, and of a test that only an outsider species could complete. When Ethan woke each morning, the memory of the dreams lingered like shadows at the edge of thought, filling him with both awe and dread. One evening, while analyzing a particularly complex spiral of symbols, Ethan noticed a recurring structure hidden within the design. It was a sequence of mathematical ratios, encoded so subtly that no one else had recognized it. Following the ratios, he arranged the glyphs in a new order, and to his shock, they formed a kind of language, primitive, yet deliberate, almost like instructions. For hours, he stared at the translated fragments until a single phrase emerged clearly enough for him to understand. The seal yields only to the unshaped hand. The words burned into his mind, and he felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He did not fully understand their meaning, but deep down he sensed they referred to humanity, a species untouched by whatever ancient conflict had destroyed the creators of the artifact. If this was true, then every other attempt by alien civilizations to open the seal had failed, because it was never meant for them. When he shared his findings with Keller, the old scholar grew silent and contemplative, his amber eyes shimmering faintly in the dim light. He agreed the translation was significant, but warned Ethan that revealing it to the council could cause panic. If alien factions believed the artifact had been designed specifically for humans, it would destabilize the fragile balance of power across dozens of worlds. Ethan understood the risk, but he also knew that hiding the truth would not keep them safe forever. The following day, representatives from several factions arrived unexpectedly at the outpost. Word had spread faster than they anticipated. The arrival of heavily armed security escorts made it clear that some species feared the artifact might contain a weapon capable of reshaping the galaxy. Tensions rose as whispers of secrecy and control passed through the station's halls. Even the researchers began to take sides, each loyal to their own people's interests. Ethan felt the weight of it all pressing down on him, yet when he returned to the artifact that night, standing alone beneath the starlit sky, he felt a strange sense of calm. He placed his hand against the smooth black surface once more, and the glyphs responded instantly, glowing faintly in a soft golden light. This time, instead of resisting, the monolith seemed to open its thoughts to him. His mind filled with fragments of alien memory, glimpses of a civilization so advanced that its knowledge could change the destiny of countless species. In that moment, Ethan realized the truth. The artifact had been waiting, not for an army, not for technology, but for understanding. Its creators had left behind something far more powerful than any weapon, something only an unshaped mind, free from the scars of their ancient war, could unlock. And somehow, impossibly, humanity had been chosen to bear that responsibility that far above him. The twin suns sank beneath the horizon, and the endless desert was swallowed by darkness. Behind Ethan, the station's lights flickered one last time before stabilizing, as though even the machines sensed the change. He stood there, palm resting against the alien seal, his breath slow and steady, knowing that everything was about to change, not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. The awakening the nights on Orpheon 9 had always been quiet, broken only by the soft rustle of shifting sands and the distant hum of the research station's power cores. But this night carried a strange energy, as if the entire desert had begun to breathe. Ethan sat alone inside the main laboratory, staring at the glowing holographic projection of the alien symbols he had been studying for weeks. His translation of the phrase, "The seal yields only to the unshaped hand," had spread quickly among the senior researchers, and though most had refused to admit it openly, there was a growing belief that humanity was the missing key. The idea alone had shaken the fragile trust among the alien factions, and the atmosphere in the station had grown heavier with every passing hour. Outside the reinforced glass walls, the massive monolith stood like a silent sentinel beneath the pale light of the twin moons, its black surface untouched by the cold winds that drifted across the dunes. Ethan felt drawn to it, the same way he had felt since the first moment he laid eyes on it, but now the pull was stronger, almost unbearable. He tried to focus on his work, tracing new patterns in the glyphs, yet every time his mind wandered, he could hear faint echoes inside his head, whispers in a language older than time, calling him closer. Keller, the elder alien scholar, entered the lab silently, his translucent robes fluttering softly as he approached. He placed a delicate clawed hand on Ethan's shoulder and spoke in his deep, resonant tone, warning him that the council had grown divided beyond repair. Several alien factions had begun deploying security forces across Orpheon 9, each determined to claim control of the artifact before anyone else. Some feared the seal contained a weapon capable of reshaping the galaxy. Others believed it held forbidden knowledge that could give unimaginable power to whoever possessed it. Keller feared that violence would erupt soon if the artifacts mystery was not resolved. Ethan listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the glowing spirals hovering above the console. He told Keller about the dreams that had grown stronger every night, visions so vivid they felt more real than waking life. In these dreams he walked among beings of light with forms shifting like liquid stars, their voices blending into a single chorus that resonated through his bones. He saw endless cities carved from crystal and living metal, entire worlds bound together by rivers of energy flowing between them, and above it all, a war so vast it swallowed galaxies. Two civilizations had clashed until neither remained, leaving only fragments of their brilliance scattered across the void. Before their final destruction, the ancient architects had hidden something of great importance, locking it behind the seal and encoding its key into a species untouched by their war, a species that would rise much later and walk among the stars. Without the burden of their past, Keller listened intently, his amber eyes reflecting both awe and fear. He explained that the builders of the artifact were known in fragmented myths among dozens of civilizations as the Illyrians. Being so advanced, they were thought to have transcended physical form long before most species even crawled from their oceans. If Ethan's visions were real, then the artifact was not just a remnant of history. It was a deliberate message across time, placed here for a purpose that none of the Council's scholars had ever imagined. As the night deepened, Ethan returned to the artifact, drawn once more by an invisible pull. The twin moons hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, and the monolith gleamed faintly under their cold light. The air was unusually still, carrying no sound but the soft crunch of his boots on the shifting dunes. When he reached the towering seal, he hesitated for only a moment before placing his hand against the smooth surface. This time, there was no resistance. The black stone rippled faintly beneath his touch like liquid glass, and a deep vibration rolled through the ground beneath his feet. Suddenly, Ethan's vision blurred, and the world around him dissolved into light. He found himself standing inside an endless chamber, where walls of pure energy rose into a sky of shimmering gold. Strange forms drifted above him, vast and weightless, their luminous shapes twisting into patterns his mind struggled to comprehend. Voices filled the space around him, layered and harmonious, speaking words he could not understand yet somehow felt in his soul. They were not speaking to him, but through him, their thoughts flowing directly into his consciousness. He saw flashes of what lay beyond the seal, glimpses of a structure buried deep beneath the sands of Orphean 9, stretching far below the surface. Its vast chambers holding secrets that could rewrite the history of the galaxy. He felt knowledge flowing into him, fragments of ancient science and forgotten truths. But just as he began to reach for them, a sudden wave of pain tore through his mind, and the vision collapsed. He fell to his knees on the desert floor, gasping for breath, his hand still resting against the cold stone of the monolith. By the time Ethan returned to the station, his legs trembling with exhaustion, the outpost was in chaos. Alarm sirens blared softly in the distance as factions loyal to different alien delegations argued openly in the main hall. Security droids rolled into position while alien guards armed with plasma rifles took up defensive stances. Word had spread that Ethan's presence triggered a reaction in the seal, and now everyone wanted control of him. To some, he was the solution to unlocking the artifact's power. To others, he was a danger that had to be removed before it was too late. Keller met him at the entrance and hurried him into a secured chamber, whispering that the Council was collapsing under the weight of its own fear. Several factions had already sent messages to their fleets, calling for reinforcements, and it was only a matter of time before Orphean 9 became the center of an interstellar conflict. Ethan felt the crushing weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had never wanted this. He had come here to study alien languages, not to become the key to unlocking a mystery older than humanity itself. But now he had no choice. Late that night, Ethan sat alone in the quiet of his quarters, staring out the small window at the dark silhouette of the monolith rising in the distance. He thought about the dreams, about the visions of ancient cities and dying stars, and about the phrase etched into the artifact's spirals: "The seal yields only to the unshaped hand." Somehow, impossibly, he knew this was his destiny. The Illyrians had chosen humanity for a reason, and if he walked away now, the consequences could be catastrophic. Far across the dunes, a faint glow began to rise from the base of the monolith, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Ethan could see it even from the window, and something deep within him stirred in response. He knew the seal was awakening, and soon the choice would no longer be his to make. The final trial, the next dawn, arrived heavy with tension, and the desert Skies above Orpheon 9 carried a strange, restless glow as though the planet itself sensed the storm that was about to fall upon it. From the balcony of the research station, Ethan watched the horizon shimmer beneath the rising suns. Beyond the dunes, the black monolith towered silently, but its surface no longer seemed lifeless. Faint waves of light rippled across the alien, spirals moving like veins of liquid gold beneath obsidian glass, as if the seal had begun to awaken from a slumber older than memory. Inside the station, chaos had taken hold. The alien factions within the council had fractured completely, and each group now operated with its own agenda. Armed patrols marched through the corridors, and heated arguments broke out between scientists who once worked side by side. The Thravik demanded that the artifact be seized and studied exclusively under their supervision, claiming that allowing a human to interact with it posed a catastrophic risk. The Nayari countered, insisting that Ethan had already proven himself vital to unlocking the seal and should be protected at all costs. Several other delegations had grown silent, retreating behind locked chambers and encrypted communications, plotting strategies in secret. Keller found Ethan in the central analysis room and urged him to leave the station entirely. He whispered that long-range sensors had detected several incoming fleets from rival factions, each converging on Orpheon 9. Within a few hours, the skies would be crowded with warships, and once they arrived, the excavation site would become a battlefield. But Ethan shook his head, his gaze fixed on the holographic projections of the alien spirals. He had seen what lay within the seal in his visions, and he understood what none of them yet realized. If the factions fought over the artifact, it would destroy them all. When he returned to the monolith, the desert stretched quiet and empty beneath the suns, and the sands glimmered faintly like scattered fragments of glass. As Ethan approached, the glyphs across the surface brightened, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, as though responding directly to his presence. He placed his palm against the smooth black surface, and the hum beneath the stone deepened into a resonant vibration that rippled through the ground. Suddenly, a voice filled his mind, not words but pure thought, layered and vast, the same chorus he had heard in his dreams. It showed him an image of the galaxy long ago, when the Illyrians thrived across thousands of worlds. He saw their triumphs, their creations, and then their fall, a war so great that it tore the very fabric of reality. The seal, the artifact, and the knowledge hidden within had been locked away to prevent such destruction from ever happening again. Only a species untouched by the war, free of its scars and hatred, could open the path forward. That species was humanity. The vision ended abruptly, and Ethan fell to his knees in the sand, gasping for breath. Around him, the distant roar of engines filled the air as dropships descended from the skies, carrying soldiers from multiple factions. Within minutes, the peaceful excavation site transformed into a standoff. Dozens of alien warriors spread out across the dunes, weapons glowing faintly under the bright light, each group demanding control of the artifact. The leader of the Thravik stepped forward, his tall insectoid frame casting a jagged shadow across the sand. In a cold, sharp voice, he ordered Ethan to step away from the monolith, declaring that humanity had no rightful claim to ancient Illyrian secrets. The Nayari delegation countered, forming a protective circle around Ethan, their luminous skin glowing faintly as they activated their energy shields. The situation teetered on the edge of violence, every faction prepared to unleash devastation to secure what lay within the seal. But then the monolith itself intervened. Without warning, a low, thunderous pulse erupted from its surface, a wave of energy so powerful that it knocked soldiers and scientists alike to their knees. The glyphs flared with blinding light, and a vast field of shimmering force enveloped the entire excavation site. Within the field, time seemed to slow, and a deep voice resonated inside every mind present. Alien and human, alike. It was not a language but pure understanding. The artifact was testing them. The voice carried a single unspoken truth: if those gathered here sought to claim what lay within through conflict, the seal would collapse, erasing everything inside and leaving nothing but an empty shell buried beneath the sands. The knowledge would be lost forever. Ethan felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes upon him as the factions argued, their voices rising with desperation and fear. But the artifact pulsed again, stronger this time, and the spirals shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns that glimmered faintly like living threads of light. Instinctively, Ethan stepped forward and placed his hand on the surface, ignoring the shouted warnings behind him. As his palm connected, the energy surged around him, wrapping him in a cocoon of golden light. Images poured into his mind faster than thought, symbols, equations, languages long dead, and entire star maps of forgotten systems scattered across the galaxy. Among the storm of information, one meaning became clear. The seal had never been designed to protect a weapon. It had been built to guard knowledge. A vast library containing the entire legacy of the Illyrians, a repository of science, history, and secrets capable of reshaping everything sentient species believed about their place in the universe. Ethan finally understood the purpose of the phrase, the unshaped hand. The Illyrians had foreseen their destruction and chosen to entrust their knowledge to a species unmarked by their war, one capable of using it without repeating their mistakes. Humanity had been that choice, though no one yet understood why. Behind him, the factions began shouting again, demanding that Ethan open the seal under their control. He could see weapons rising, glimmers of energy charging across the dunes, and he knew that if a single shot was fired, the artifact would close forever, and its knowledge would be lost for eternity. Summoning all his courage, Ethan turned to face them, his voice steady, though his heart raced. He declared that the artifact would not allow anyone to claim its secrets through violence, that it responded only to unity and understanding, not power or greed. For a moment, silence followed his words, broken only by the soft hum of the monolith. But as the tension eased slightly, the sky above them darkened as the first wave of battleships descended, their shadows stretching across the dunes. Keller stepped forward then, placing himself between Ethan and the soldiers, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority as he called for restraint. He reminded them all of the artifact's warning, and begged them to see reason, but the flicker of fear in the eyes of the faction leaders said everything. None of them trusted each other, and none were willing to walk away. The seal pulsed one final time, brighter than before, and Ethan felt the energy pulling at him, inviting him to complete the sequence he had been studying for so long. He understood. Now that this was the final trial, the moment everything had been leading toward. If he succeeded, the artifact would open, and the knowledge of a lost civilization would be revealed. If he failed, everything would be destroyed, and the galaxy would lose its greatest inheritance forever. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer, his fingers tracing the glowing spirals as they shifted under his touch, rearranging themselves into a living pattern of light. The ground trembled beneath him, and the air shimmered as the monolith began to respond. Behind him, the factions watched in silence, their weapons lowered but ready, waiting to see what would happen next. Ethan placed his other hand on the seal and whispered the final sequence, the sounds instinctively forming in his throat as though the knowledge had always been hidden deep within his mind, waiting for this moment. The light intensified until the entire desert glowed like a second sun, and the monolith groaned with a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the endless sands. And then, as the energy built to an unbearable peak, the seal began to open. Human legacy, the desert of Orphean 9 trembled beneath the roar of power as the monolith came alive, its black surface glowing like molten gold, and streams of light rose into the dark sky where distant warships hovered in tense silence. The alien factions that had gathered around the excavation site stood frozen, their weapons forgotten, their gazes fixed on the impossible sight before them. For thousands of years, scholars, explorers, and empires had tried and failed to open the ancient seal, but now under the faint light of twin suns and two silver moons, it was responding to the touch of a single human hand. Ethan stood before the colossal structure, his breath steady despite the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. The spiraling glyphs shifted beneath his palms like living veins of fire, rearranging themselves into patterns no one else could understand, patterns he instinctively knew had been waiting for him all along. The voice inside his mind returned, deeper and clearer than before, and though it carried no words, its meaning was undeniable. The test was nearly over, but this final step would decide everything. Behind him, Keller stood silent, his amber eyes glowing faintly as he watched with reverence. Around them, the soldiers of the factions lowered their weapons, not from trust, but from awe. Even the Thravik commander, whose insectoid frame towered over most others, remained still, his sharp mandibles switching slightly as he struggled to comprehend what was unfolding. Far above, the shadows of orbiting battleships slid across the dunes, their weapons primed but unused, as though the entire galaxy itself was holding its breath. The light around the monolith expanded suddenly, enveloping Ethan completely, and the world dissolved into a storm of visions. He saw the Illyrians as they once were, luminous beings of pure energy inhabiting forms of intricate matter, shaping entire star systems as easily as humans shaped stone. He saw them thrive across 1,000 worlds, building wonders that defied imagination, but he also saw the war that destroyed them. Two great Illyrian factions, divided by fear and pride, had turned their power against each other until their empires burned, and the stars themselves were scarred. At the edge of extinction, the Illyrians had made a choice. They would preserve their knowledge but hide it where no surviving faction could ever claim it as a weapon. The seal had been their safeguard, and they had designed it so that only a species untouched by their war could pass its test, a species unshaped by their hatred and ambition. Somehow, impossibly, that species had become humanity. Ethan felt the enormity of it settle deep in his chest, a weight both terrifying and wondrous. The vision faded, and he stood once more beneath the alien sky, the artifact towering before him, its spirals blazing brighter than ever. The ground shook as the monolith split soundlessly down the center, two vast panels sliding apart to reveal a passage descending into the depths of the planet. Warm light spilled from within, bathing the dunes in a golden glow. A collective gasp rose from the gathered factions, but no one moved, as though an unspoken agreement held them rooted in place. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his boots sinking into the soft sand. Each step carried the weight of billions of lives and the hope of uncountable civilizations. Keller followed at a respectful distance, while the others remained behind, unwilling or perhaps afraid to enter. As Ethan crossed the threshold, a soft wave of energy washed over him, and suddenly the weight of his body seemed to vanish. The air inside was alive, humming with a deep resonance, and strange flowing lights drifted lazily along the walls, forming patterns that shifted and dissolved as though responding to his presence. The chamber stretched endlessly downward, carved from smooth black stone and lit by veins of liquid gold flowing like rivers through the walls. At its center rose a crystalline structure that pulsed with gentle light, and as Ethan approached, the voice returned once more, filling his mind with clarity. This was the Illyrian Archive, a vault containing the sum of their knowledge, their science, their art, and their understanding of the universe. It had been preserved here for eons, waiting for the moment when a species would prove capable of receiving it. Ethan reached out, his fingertips brushing the surface of the crystal. and the chamber erupted with cascading waves of energy. Countless images flooded his mind in an instant, maps of forgotten galaxies, formulas describing the bending of time, and visions of life forms so strange and beautiful they defied comprehension. Yet it was not overwhelming. The archive seemed to know exactly how much to give, shaping the flow of information to match the limits of his understanding. It was as if the Illyrians themselves were guiding him, teaching him step by step. Outside the chamber, the alien factions waited restlessly. Some stared in wonder, while others whispered anxiously, fearing what this discovery meant for the balance of power. But when Ethan emerged from the glowing passage, his expression calm and steady, they sensed that something profound had changed. The knowledge of the Illyrians was no longer locked away, yet it had not been claimed by any single faction. Instead, it had chosen humanity as its steward, and no one present could deny the artifact's will. The Thravic commander stepped forward, his voice clicking sharply as he demanded that Ethan share everything with the council, insisting that no one species should control such power. The Nayari delegate countered with quiet conviction, arguing that the Illyrians' decision had been clear. Voices rose, weapons trembled, and the air grew tense once more. But before conflict could ignite, Keller raised his clawed hands and spoke with the full weight of his authority. He reminded them all of the warning carried by the artifact, that violence would erase everything and leave the galaxy in ignorance forever. The Illyrians had given their gift not to fuel war, but to prevent it, and anyone who tried to seize the archive through force would doom them all. Slowly, reluctantly, the factions lowered their weapons. A fragile silence settled over the dunes. As realization took hold, for the first time since humanity had joined the interstellar community, every species present stood on equal ground, united by something greater than their differences. The artifact had chosen Ethan not because of power, technology, or influence, but because humanity carried no scars of the Illyrian War, no ancient grudges, and no claim to dominance. The unshaped hand had opened the seal, and in doing so, it had offered a chance for a new beginning. As the twin suns climbed higher above the horizon, their light washing over the golden spirals still glowing faintly on the monolith's surface, Ethan looked out across the vast desert and felt a quiet certainty take root within him. The galaxy had changed forever, and so had humanity's place within it. They were no longer just newcomers among the stars. They had become the keepers of a forgotten legacy, entrusted with knowledge capable of reshaping existence itself. The fleets above Orpheon 9 began to withdraw one by one, leaving the skies clear and silent. The artifact stood open beneath the pale light, its secrets finally revealed, yet untouched by greed or violence. Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The archive contained answers to questions no one had even thought to ask, and unlocking its mysteries would take lifetimes. But humanity would not face that journey alone. The Illyrians had left their legacy not for one species, but for all who chose to understand rather than destroy. As he turned back to the monolith, a soft breeze carried grains of silver sand across his boots, and for a moment, the desert seemed alive with possibility. In that stillness, Ethan whispered words only he could hear, words carried from the visions that still lingered in his mind. A promise that humanity would honor the gift it had been given and forge a future worthy of it. And high above the endless sands of Orpheon 9, where two suns burned and twin moons glimmered faintly in the distance, the galaxy itself felt as though it was holding its breath, waiting to see what humanity would become. The end.